Hi y'all, thanks for joining us today. My name is Cydnee Sanders and I'm doing this video series in partnership with Atlas AB in St. Paul, Minnesota. Today's topic is an introduction to translanguaging and is the first of two videos on this topic, so be sure to check out the second video called Utilizing Learners Linguistic Toolboxes. Remember that in any of these topics, 10 to 15 minutes is not enough, so the idea of this, or really our hope, is that these begin the conversations among educators, then we will do what we can to present different ideas, resources, and solutions in bite-sized chunks. As I mentioned, this is one topic out of a series we're doing called Moving Equity Forward in Adult Education. Be sure to check out our other videos. All right, a favorite place of mine with adult learners or professional development is to go over an agenda, since many of us like knowing what's coming. So let's take a look. Today we started with the welcome. Next, we will do another community check-in, which is like a prior knowledge question. Then we will dig into what translanguaging is. And after that, we will look at some reflection questions we have put together for you. The next video will have more specific classroom examples, but my goal for this video is to make sure we have a grounding in the theory and do some reflection around our beliefs on language and education. Finally, we will wrap up briefly by going over the accompanying discussion guide. So let's start with our community check-in. Today's question is, what languages or dialects do you use in your daily life? You do not have to be a fluent speaker. Now, let me explain a little bit about this question. I included dialects because not everyone watching this might be teaching English language learners, and the US and all around the world has many dialects of English. Think about if you teach learners who speak English as their primary language, but they speak in a different dialect than you. You do not have to be a fluent speaker in the learner's languages or dialects. Think about what languages and dialects you are surrounded by in your daily life, even if you only know a couple words here or there, plus your primary language. Feel free to pause the video for a minute to think about this. If you're watching with others, take a moment and talk about your answers. Great. If you paused, welcome back. For me, I'm monolingual, but I do know a couple different dialects of English. So I was really thinking about how everyone I talk to in Minnesota always comments on my use of y'all. And actually, many friends have started using it because of me. So you're welcome. But my family speaks a different dialect than up here because we come from a Southern Black Creole community. Then inside the classroom, since I work mostly with English learners, I use a few words of Somali, Spanish, and Arabic with learners. Then, while I was living in South Africa, I definitely learned and used a different dialect of English, among other languages. In English, I had to learn new words, new pronunciation, and different ways of spelling different spelling rules. I hope this question helped you reflect on the many languages and dialects in your life because today's topic looks at how learners might use their own language skills and how that is a key part of learners' identities. Before we dive into translanguaging, I want to remind y'all of this image. If you've watched some of the other videos, you might have seen this before. As I'm constantly talking about, there are many ways to bring learners' cultures and identities into the classroom. I really like this visual, which I got from a professor of mine. One teaching approach I like to use is culturally responsive and sustaining teaching. There's a lot of different words for this, but I think of culturally responsive and sustaining teaching as an overarching umbrella that is about honoring all of learners' identities. Then we can narrow down into different identities like being a learner, but also acknowledging students have many life experiences that make them experts. We are teaching adults and shouldn't assume they are empty vessels. We can draw on their family experiences and their languages, just to name a few. Today, we are going to narrow down and explore incorporating learners' languages and dialects. I also want to connect back to a favorite quote of mine because it deeply connects with today's topic, so here it is. In Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, he paraphrases a famous quote by Nelson Mandela. Noah says, "When you make the effort to speak someone else's language, even if it's just basic phrases here and there, you are saying to them, I understand that you have a culture and identity that exists beyond me. I see you as a human being." Above all else, I want to make sure the learners I teach know I see them as human beings. And one way to do this is through translanguaging. All right, now let's actually dig into what translanguaging means. This part will focus on English language classrooms, but in just a minute, there will be some connections to learners who speak English as their primary language also. Before grad school, translanguaging was a very new way for me to think about languages. I know it's new for many others too, though in the last couple of years, I think many more people have heard of it. Just in case you haven't heard of it or need a refresher, here's a short introduction. In an English language classroom, a lot of recent research has been exploring why a multilingual approach to teaching English has more benefits than English-only policies. For other adult ed classes, the same goes for including other English dialects. If you haven't read much on it, I encourage you to look into it more. So, what is translanguaging? One of the leading scholars on the subject is Ofelia Garcia, and Garcia says translanguaging is the deployment of a speaker's full linguistic repertoire without regard for watchful adherence to the social and politically defined boundaries of named and usually national and state languages. You'll see in her research that Garcia talks about bilingual learners mostly, and she mostly works with Spanish English bilingual teachers and students, which is a very different context than what I'm teaching in. Mostly because I do not speak any of my learners' languages, but I invite us to think about how we can take some of these principles into our own classrooms. What's key to Garcia's argument is translanguaging gets rid of racist linguistic hierarchies. We are thinking of language as all part of one toolbox. So it's up to learners to decide for themselves what language is best in any given context or moment. It's up to us as teachers to provide them with English tools. Today, we are focusing on one part of the definition, thinking of language as one big toolbox. The two most important things I've taken from Garcia's research is one, translanguaging sees learners' other languages as assets, not as something that inhibits the learning of English or academic English. And second, translanguaging removes the language hierarchy that has existed throughout the history of English teaching, which has demanded that English is superior to all other languages, that English is the only language needed for academic and career success, and that, again, other languages inhibit the learning of English. I have put standard in quotation marks because, as we've already mentioned, there are many dialects of English, but our education system puts standard US English or academic English as the most important. I really like this visual my professor shared with me with the balance scale. When we think of all the languages as one toolbox and we are placing the languages on a more even footing, then learners can decide which tool to use. Again, translanguaging research shows us that we all hold our languages in one part of the brain, and activating one activates the others. Therefore, all students' linguistic resources is just good science. Here, I want to make a note that translanguaging as a concept can include other dialects of English also, which will connect more to other adult ed programs like GED or Career Pathways too. On day one of my linguistics class, I learned that many linguists agree that all languages and dialects are valid and none are linguistically superior to others. But why is this not believed throughout dominant society? Yes, it's true that we have to teach academic standard English to help students pass examinations, but I think it's worth asking ourselves some questions about our beliefs around language and education and society. We can have conversations with learners about how they experience discrimination about their primary dialect or language and why it isn't valued in education, and can help them make connections to new material with the target language through using their dialect. Here's a couple suggested reflection questions. These are included on the accompanying discussion guide. Feel free to pause the video if you want, or you can come back to these later. So ask yourself, who decided what qualifies as standard or academic English? How does the stigma of other dialects disadvantage many learners in adult education? And finally, how can I see and utilize learners' dialects as an asset in learning? Again, these will be on the discussion guide, so up to you if you think of these now or later. Finally, I want to make sure we all understand why I believe this is important, and I have two main reasons. These are the same reasons from the video about funds of knowledge and using an asset-based approach. As you heard me say before, it's so important to me to acknowledge learners' full humanity, their knowledge and their experiences. This is one of my core beliefs, just like that quote by Trevor Noah from earlier. This is my driving force for bringing equity into the classroom, and this includes language equity. And second, research shows us that students learn better if you incorporate what learners already know to bridge that into new information that they are learning. Now let's go over a few suggested reflection questions, self-reflection questions I have for y'all. These will also be in the discussion guide, so you can take some time to think about them. In the next video, I'll give some more concrete classroom examples to try, but I think this is an important topic to reflect on first. Question number 1. If you were taught that English only in class is best practice, how does translanguaging present a new perspective? 2. Does your school have an official English only policy, or do some colleagues tell students not to speak in their home languages or dialects? 3. How can you start to bring up this topic with colleagues? 4. How do you already make space for other languages and dialects in your classroom? All right, that's it for today's bite-sized task. Don't forget to visit the discussion guide for this video to deepen your understanding of this episode's topic. The link to the discussion guide can be found in the description to the video on YouTube and also linked on the Atlas website. The discussion guide provides questions, activities, and resources to learn more. We have linked the PDF of the slides in the guide also for your own notes. And here's 2 resources that we want to highlight. The first is Michelle Benegas and Natalia Benjamin's new book, Language of Identity, Language of Access. This book is a great resource on this topic. And also a recent article in the Minnesota AB Connect newsletter from a community member giving their ideas on this topic too. So you can check that out. These and other resources are linked in the discussion guide and the PDF of the slides. Also remember to check out Atlas's Cultural Competency Library and the Minnesota ABE Connect newsletter for even more resources. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to watch the entire playlist and like and subscribe so you don't miss a video. I'll see y'all next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.